My name is Margaret, though most people just call me Grandma Maggie. I am 75 years old, and if you are listening to my story today, I want to first ask, where are you watching me from? I always like to know because life has taught me that we are all connected no matter how far apart we live. Some of you might be in New York, some in Texas, some maybe in California, or even outside the country. Wherever you are, I want you to know this story is for you, and I hope you learn something about kindness, courage, and faith in the middle of fear. Now let me take you straight into the middle of what happened. Imagine me, a woman of 75 years, sitting in an airplane thousands of feet above the ground. The clouds outside the window looked so soft, like white cotton spread across the sky. I had never thought I would be flying this late in life, but my children insisted I should go see my granddaughter in Chicago. Everything was calm until suddenly, boom! The plane shook so hard I almost bit my tongue. The seatbelt lights came on, the oxygen masks above rattled, and my heart began to pound in my chest so loudly I was sure the man beside me could hear it. I gripped the armrest and whispered, "Lord, not like this. Please, not in the sky." The shaking grew worse, like the plane was being tossed by angry hands. People screamed. A child cried behind me. My ears went hot, my palms wet, and my blood pressure. I could feel it rising so fast I thought I would have hypertension right there in the air. For a moment, I almost lost control of myself. I wanted to shout, to cry, to even pee on myself if it would ease the pressure inside me. I closed my eyes tight, but the sound of the engines roaring louder made me open them again quickly. At that very moment I asked myself, was this how it would all end for me, up in the sky without my feet on the ground? But before I tell you whether the plane steadied or not, let me take you back to the beginning, because every story has a journey before the storm. I was born in Georgia, raised by parents who taught me that kindness was like planting seeds. You never know which seed will grow into a tree that saves someone's life one day. That lesson guided me through my younger years, through marriage, through raising children, and now into my old age. I always believed if you show love to people, one day when trouble comes, someone will show love to you. That is how I lived. The day my journey began, my son Daniel came to my apartment. He is tall, with a little gray in his hair now, though he tries to cover it up. "Mama," he said, "you can't keep saying no forever. You need to travel and see Sarah. She misses you." Sarah is my granddaughter, a bright, smiling girl who had just started college in Chicago. I loved her dearly, but the thought of flying made my stomach turn. "Danny," I said, holding his hand, "you know I've never been in an airplane. The ground is where I belong. Why must I go up there?" He laughed. "Mama, it's safe. Think of all the times you prayed for us when we were kids. Think of all the storms you faced and survived. If anyone can handle it, you can." I thought about it that night while drinking my tea. He was right, I had faced storms before. When my husband passed away, when money was short, when my health wasn't at its best. I had survived those storms with faith and kindness. Maybe this was just another test of courage. So I agreed. And oh, the day I got to the airport, it was like stepping into another world. People were rushing everywhere, pulling suitcases, hugging their loved ones, speaking in voices that blended into one giant hum. A young woman working at the counter smiled at me when she saw I was struggling with my boarding pass. "Don't worry, ma'am," she said kindly. "I'll help you. First time flying?" "Yes," I admitted, and she patted my hand. That little act of kindness calmed me more than she could ever know. Then came the security checks, the waiting, and finally, stepping into that giant bird of steel. My seat was by the window, and when I sat down, I whispered a small prayer. Beside me was a man named Robert, who introduced himself as soon as I settled. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a soft voice. "Don't worry," he said, as though he had read my heart. "Flying is easier than driving once you get used to it." I smiled, though inside my stomach felt like jelly. When the plane took off, my hands shook as I clutched the seat. But Robert kept talking, telling me stories about his own mother and how she once traveled alone to visit him. His words distracted me from the strange pull of gravity and the sound of the engines roaring. I thought to myself, isn't it beautiful how a stranger can bring peace just by sharing a story? The first hour was calm. I even allowed myself to relax and look out at the clouds. Felt like looking at heaven's doorstep. I thought about my parents, about my late husband, and I whispered their names. But then, just as I began to breathe easily, it happened, the turbulence. The sudden jolt. The way the plane dipped and shook. People screamed, and the peaceful moment vanished like smoke. My heart leaped into my throat, and I grabbed Robert's arm without shame. "Is this normal?" gasped. His face turned pale, though he tried to smile. "It'll pass," he said, but his voice trembled. I wanted to believe him, but the shaking grew worse, and all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I remembered what Daniel had said about courage, but in that moment, courage felt so far away. I whispered to myself, "Don't let me have hypertension, Lord. Don't let my heart give up." The air hostesses tried to calm people down, but their eyes showed worry too. One of them nearly stumbled as she grabbed a seat for balance. That was when I realized something was truly wrong. And then crack. Sound like metal straining filled the air. The plane dipped suddenly, and people screamed louder than before. I could feel every drop of blood rushing through me, every nerve standing awake. I held on for dear life, my eyes wide, my heart beating like a drum. What happened after that? Well, let's just say if you think the storm was over, you are wrong. That was only the beginning. The plane jerked again, and my heart jumped inside my chest like a frightened rabbit. The lights above flickered, and one woman 2 rows ahead of me let out a scream so sharp it pierced right through my bones. Children cried, men muttered prayers, and for a brief moment, I was sure we were going to fall straight out of the sky. I gripped Robert's arm tighter. My fingers dug into him without mercy, and I didn't care if I was hurting him. He turned to me, his eyes wide but his lips trying to form a calm smile. "It's okay," he whispered, though even he didn't sound convinced. "It's just turbulence. Just turbulence," he muttered. "Feels like the devil himself is shaking this plane." Another violent shake threw my bag out from under the seat. It slid down the aisle, and I almost wanted to chase it just to give my body something else to focus on. But I couldn't move. My legs felt like frozen wood. My chest tightened and I thought, this is it. My blood pressure is going to shoot up so high they'll have to carry me out of here. I closed my eyes and prayed under my breath. "Lord, let me see my Sarah one more time. Don't let me go in the sky. Please." When I opened my eyes, I saw the young flight attendant again. She was moving carefully, holding onto each seat as the plane rocked. She reached my row and leaned close. Her name tag read Emily. "Ma'am," she said softly, "you're okay. Just keep your seatbelt tight and breathe slowly. Don't think about what's outside. Think about someone you love." Her words touched me. Here she was in the same storm as me, maybe even more afraid, but still speaking kindness to calm me. It reminded me of what my mother used to say. When you're afraid, help someone else who's afraid, and you'll both find strength together. So I nodded and tried to breathe. I thought of Sarah's smile, her laughter, the way she used to braid my hair when she was just a little girl. That memory warmed me enough to loosen my grip on Robert's arm just a little. The shaking slowed for a while. Not completely, but enough that I could unclench my jaw. People were still whispering prayers, but at least the screaming had stopped. That was a low moment, the calm after a terrible scare. Some passengers even began to laugh nervously, as if laughing would erase the fear they just felt. Robert patted my hand. "See, it's passing. I told you." I gave him a look that said I wasn't so sure. "If it passes like this again, I might not survive it." He chuckled softly. "You're tougher than you think." We sat in silence for a few minutes, the plane humming as if nothing had happened. I started to feel a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion, like someone who had just escaped a wild storm. My body relaxed against the seat, and I let myself believe maybe the worst was behind us. But then, just as I allowed my heart to slow down, the captain's voice came over the speaker. His tone was steady, but there was a tightness to it that sent shivers down my spine. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, We are experiencing stronger turbulence than expected. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We may need to adjust our course. Adjust our course. My chest tightened again. That didn't sound like something small. That sounded like trouble. And before I could ask Robert what it meant, the plane tilted sharply to the left. People screamed again. Food trays slid off laps, and an overhead compartment flew open, dropping a suitcase into the aisle with a loud thud. The plane dipped lower, the windows showing nothing but thick clouds. My hands flew to my chest and I whispered, "Oh Lord, hold this plane up. Don't let us fall." Then came the sound that froze every soul on that plane. The engine coughed. A terrible, choking noise like a car about to die on the highway. The plane shook harder than before, and I felt my heart slam so painfully inside me I thought it would burst. I could see terror written on every face around me. The engine coughed again, louder this time, followed by a deep groan that rattled through the floor of the plane. My heart almost leapt out of my chest. I clutched the cross hanging around my neck and whispered, "Lord, I'm not ready. Please, not yet." The cabin erupted in chaos. A baby shrieked from somewhere behind me, and her mother's voice cracked as she tried to soothe her. A man across the aisle was muttering rapid prayers, his lips moving so fast they were a blur. The elderly woman in front of me clutched both armrests so tightly her knuckles turned white. Robert squeezed my hand. His palm was clammy, but his grip was steady. "Stay with me," he said firmly, as if he was trying to anchor me to reality. "I feel my blood pressure climbing," I gasped. "If the plane doesn't take me, my heart will." He looked into my eyes and said, "Then we'll breathe together. In and out. Nice and slow." He demonstrated, inhaling deeply, then exhaling. I copied him, though every breath felt like a battle against my own panic. The captain's voice crackled overhead again. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We've hit an unexpected air pocket. We are working on stabilizing the engines. Please keep your seatbelts fastened. Remain calm." A man shouted from the back. "We're about to drop out of the sky." His voice sent a ripple of fear across the passengers, and murmurs grew louder. That was when Emily, the flight attendant, returned. Her face was pale, but she wore a small, steady smile. She moved from row to row, patting shoulders, whispering words of comfort. When she reached me again, she bent down so we were eye to eye. "Ma'am," she said gently, "I know this is frightening, but you're strong. Can see it in you. Think of your family. Think of the reason you're flying today. Hold on for them." Her kindness made my eyes sting with tears. I thought of Sarah again, her laugh, her warm hugs, the way she always begged me to tell her bedtime stories when she was small. I couldn't let fear take that away. Couldn't. For a few minutes the plane steadied. The groaning stopped, the shaking slowed, and silence spread over the cabin like a fragile blanket. Everyone sat frozen, afraid to even breathe too loudly, as though any sound would anger the sky again. Then, slowly, conversations picked back up. Nervous laughter filled the air. Someone even joked, "Well, at least the peanuts are free." People chuckled weakly, grateful for any distraction. That was the low, the moment of fragile calm. I even unclenched my fists and let out a shaky laugh myself. My heart slowed, though I could still feel its tremor in my chest. I whispered to Robert, "Maybe we'll make it after all." But just as those words left my lips, the plane lurched violently downward. This time it wasn't just turbulence. It was a drop so sudden my stomach felt like it was left behind in the clouds. Drinks spilled, luggage banged, and screams filled the air once more. I pressed back into my seat, my breath snatched away by the force. My ears rang as people cried out around me. Robert's grip tightened on my hand, almost crushing it, but I didn't care. The captain's voice returned, louder and sharper than before. "Brace! Brace! Everyone brace!" My blood ran cold. That word, brace. I had only ever heard it in movies about plane crashes. I bent forward as instructed, pressing my forehead to the seat in front of me, my hands trembling so hard they could barely hold on. My heart pounded so fiercely I thought it would break through my ribs. The plane kept dropping faster and faster. My ears popped and my eyes blurred with tears. I thought of Sarah again. I thought of my children. I thought of every prayer I had ever whispered in my 75 years. And then came the sound, the screech of metal straining, the roar of the wind against the wings, and the sharp cry of someone shouting, "We're going down!" The screams around me rose like a choir of fear, drowning out even the roar of the engines. I braced myself, pressing my forehead tighter against the seat in front of me. My chest heaved with quick, shallow breaths, each one a battle against panic. My hands trembled so hard they could barely clutch the armrest. The plane jolted again, then leveled out for a few seconds. The silence that followed was eerie, broken only by muffled sobs and the shaky breathing of terrified passengers. I slowly lifted my head. My neck ached, but I needed to see. Robert was still gripping my hand, his knuckles white. He turned his head toward me. "You okay?" he whispered, his voice tight. "No," I admitted honestly. "But I'm alive." That admission gave me strength. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say you're scared. Emily, the flight attendant, was walking back down the aisle. Her smile was gone, replaced by tight determination. She leaned down to a mother holding a crying baby. "You're okay. The baby's okay. Hold tight." Then she moved to the next row. She was like a soldier in a war, trying to keep the line from breaking. I admired her courage. I thought about how my mother used to say, "Courage doesn't mean you aren't afraid. It means you act even while you're afraid." Minutes passed. The plane still shuddered every now and then, but nothing like before. The captain's voice returned, calmer this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your cooperation. We hit an unexpected storm cell, but we are working through it. Please remain seated." The words soothed some people. A man across the aisle even muttered, "Thank God." A ripple of relief passed through the cabin. That was the low, a fragile calm after the storm. I leaned back in my seat, exhausted. My body ached from the tension, and I could feel a headache pounding at the base of my skull. Robert handed me a small bottle of water from his bag. "Drink," he said softly. "It'll help." I took it, my hands still trembling, and managed a sip. The cool water steadied me. "Thank you," I whispered. He gave a small smile. "We'll get through this." For a moment I believed him. I thought about Sarah waiting for me in Chicago, about hugging her tightly when I arrived. I imagined her laugh, her warm smile. That vision carried me like a candle in the dark. But then, without warning, the plane dipped again. This time, the oxygen masks dropped from above, dangling in front of our faces like pale ghosts. Gasps filled the cabin, followed by screams. My heart leapt to my throat. The captain's voice came over the speaker, firm and urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, put on your oxygen masks immediately." I froze, staring at the mask swinging in front of me. My hands wouldn't move. My whole body locked in fear. Robert reached up, pulled it down, and gently placed it over my face. "Breathe, Maggie," he said. "Breathe." I inhaled the sharp, clean air through the mask. My chest heaved, but at least I could breathe. Around me chaos reigned. People fumbled with their masks, some crying, others shouting. A young boy couldn't reach his, and his sister pulled it down for him, her hands shaking but steady enough to save him. Even in terror, kindness was alive. The plane rocked violently again, the masks swaying. My blood pressure spiked so high I thought my head might explode. I clutched Robert's arm and whispered, "Is this it?" He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the window, wide with fear. I turned too, and what I saw made my blood run cold. One of the engines, visible from our side, was sparking. Bright flashes of light shot out like angry fireworks. The screams grew louder. Someone shouted, "The engine's on fire!" And at that moment I thought, this storm is far from over. The spark from the engine burned itself into my memory, brighter than lightning. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was terror that sat heavy in my chest. The sight of those orange flashes against the gray sky made people lose every bit of calm they had left. "We're going to die!" someone shouted from the back. The word spread like wildfire, feeding panic. A woman fainted 2 rows up. Children wailed, and even grown men were shaking their heads in disbelief, gripping their masks as if they were lifelines. Robert turned to me, his face pale, his mask fogging with each frantic breath. "Don't look out there," he said. "Keep your eyes on me." But I couldn't. My eyes were glued to the engine, each spark making my heart hammer faster. My palms were sweaty, my fingers numb. I could feel my blood pressure surging. I was sure if a doctor had been beside me, they would have seen the numbers climbing like wildfire. The captain's voice broke through the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've lost one engine, but the plane is designed to fly on the other. Remain calm. We are preparing for an emergency landing." Emergency landing. The words made my stomach twist. The passengers around me cried harder, and I found myself shaking my head. I wasn't ready. I had not come this far to vanish in the sky. Emily, the flight attendant, moved swiftly through the aisle, her mask tight on her face. She bent to reassure the fainted woman, then looked around at all of us. "Listen," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the screams. "The captain has control. You must stay seated and keep your masks on. We will get through this." Her bravery steadied me, even if just for a heartbeat. I thought again of Sarah, of her waiting at the airport, her eyes scanning the crowd for me. That picture in my mind gave me strength. The plane shuddered again, dropping a few feet. My stomach lurched, and people screamed, clutching at their seats. The lights flickered. I squeezed Robert's hand, and he squeezed back, both of us silent in our terror. Then, for a moment, the storm eased. The sparks outside dimmed, the shuddering slowed, and the sky cleared just enough for a pale ray of sunlight to pierce through the clouds. The passengers gasped, some crying with relief, others whispering prayers of thanks. That was the low, a fragile moment of calm, as if heaven had cracked open to give us a glimpse of hope. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for one more breath." But the peace didn't last. The captain's voice returned, tight with urgency. "Brace for impact. Repeat, brace for impact." The screams erupted again. I bent forward, pressing against the seat in front of me, my body trembling so violently I thought my bones would rattle loose. Robert leaned forward too, his hand never leaving mine. The sound of the engine failing completely filled the air, a sickening silence following as the plane began to drop faster. Loose bags flew through the cabin, masks dangled wildly, and people sobbed openly. And then boom! A sharp, deafening noise came from beneath us, and the whole plane tilted violently to the side. In that instant I thought, this is it. This is the end. The boom shook the cabin so hard it felt like the air itself was tearing apart. People screamed as the plane tilted, throwing loose objects down the aisle. My head slammed against the seat in front of me, and for a moment, stars exploded in my vision. Robert was shouting, but I could barely hear him over the chaos. "Hold on, Maggie. Hold on." His hand was still clamped tightly around mine, as if letting go meant one of us would slip away. The captain's voice roared over the intercom. "Brace! Brace!" I bent forward, burying my face in the seat. My whole body shook. My chest ached from the pounding of my heart. I felt hot tears roll down my cheeks, wetting the mask over my face. I was 75 years old, but in that moment, I felt like a child again, helpless, small, and terrified of the dark. Then the plane leveled just slightly. It was still dropping, but steadier now. The captain's voice returned, firmer this time. "We have partial control. Stay down. We are attempting an emergency descent." Partial control. Those words gave me both hope and dread. The passengers behind me sobbed with relief at the steadier movement. Some even whispered thanks to God. That was the low, a shaky calm in the middle of the storm. I lifted my head just enough to look at Robert. His face was slick with sweat, his lips pale. But when our eyes met, he nodded. We might make it, he said. I clung to those words. Emily came rushing down the aisle again, her hair loose now, her mask tilted to one side. She helped a young boy who had dropped his mask, then pressed her hand on my shoulder. "You're doing great, ma'am," she said, her voice trembling but strong enough to steady me. "Just hold on a little longer." Her kindness gave me courage. I sat up straighter, adjusting my mask. My breaths were ragged, but at least I was still breathing. The cabin grew eerily quiet as the passengers waited, bracing themselves for whatever came next. The clouds outside thinned, and for the first time in hours, the ground became visible far below. It looked like a patchwork quilt: green fields, gray roads, tiny rivers glistening in the sunlight. I had never seen the earth from so high before. It was beautiful, even in such terror. But beauty did little to calm the fear when the plane suddenly dipped again, harder this time. A suitcase flew across the aisle, hitting a man in the leg. He cried out in pain, clutching his knee. People screamed again. The fragile calm shattered in an instant. The captain's voice came back, sharp and urgent. "Prepare. We may not reach the runway. Brace." The words sent shock through every soul on board. Not reach the runway. My blood pressure spiked again, so high I thought my veins would burst. Robert grabbed my arm. His voice shook. "Maggie, if this is it, don't say it." I snapped, cutting him off. "We're not done. I have to see my Sarah." The plane groaned, metal straining against gravity. The nose dipped lower. I could feel it, the terrible pull of the earth calling us down. My ears popped, my vision blurred, and the screams rose louder than ever. And then, with a screech that tore through the cabin, the plane hit something. My body jolted forward, pain shooting through my chest and back. Luggage rained down from the compartments. Sparks burst outside the window again. The impact was real. We had hit the ground or something close to it. And as the plane screeched and rattled violently beneath us, all I could think was, is this the crash? Is this how it ends? The screech of metal against the earth was like nothing I had ever heard before. It was a scream that rattled my bones, a cry that told me we were fighting for life against forces far stronger than us. The plane shook violently, throwing passengers against their seatbelts. The smell of smoke filled the cabin, sharp and choking, and people coughed through their masks. My hands gripped the armrests so tightly my fingers went numb. Robert's arm pressed against mine, his voice hoarse as he shouted, "Hold on, Maggie." The plane lurched again, one side dropping lower. Through the window, I saw the wings scraping the ground, sparks flying like fireworks against the dirt. My heart raced so fast I thought it might burst. We skidded. Hard. The plane bounced once, twice, then slammed down again with a deafening boom. The overhead compartments burst open, raining bags and coats into the aisle. People screamed, cried, prayed. Somewhere behind me a man shouted, "God save us!" And then, suddenly, the motion slowed. The rattling eased. The nose of the plane dipped forward, dragging across the ground until finally, mercifully, it stopped with a violent shudder. For a moment, silence. Absolute silence. My ears rang, my chest heaved, and tears streamed down my face. "We're alive," Robert whispered, his voice broken with disbelief. But that silence didn't last. A sharp smell reached us, stronger smoke and something worse. "Fire! Fire!" Someone screamed from the back. "The engine's on fire!" Panic erupted again. People scrambled against their seatbelts, fumbling with the buckles. Children wailed, parents shouted their names. The aisle became chaos, bodies pressing forward, desperate to reach the exits. Emily's voice rose above the panic. "Stay seated. Remain calm. We are evacuating row by row." She shouted with authority, her hands waving people back. Even in the chaos, she stood like a pillar, refusing to let fear control her. I fumbled with my seatbelt, my fingers trembling too hard to release it. Robert leaned over, pressed the button, and pulled me free. "Come on," he said. "We have to move." I tried to stand, but my legs wobbled beneath me. Fear and shock had drained all my strength. I stumbled, and Robert caught me by the elbow. "Lean on me," he said firmly. "We're getting out of here." Smoke filled the cabin now, thick and suffocating. People coughed and cried as they pushed toward the emergency exits. I clung to Robert, my throat burning, my heart pounding like a drum. We shuffled forward step by step, the aisle crowded with frantic bodies. Some shoved, desperate to escape, but others reached out, steadying strangers, pulling children close. In terror, kindness still shone through. When we reached the exit, I froze. The emergency slide stretched down into the open air, flames visible near the wing. My legs trembled. I can't," I stammered. Robert gripped my hand. "You can. You have to. For Sarah." His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. For Sarah. My granddaughter. Waiting for me. I took a deep breath, whispered a prayer, and then, with Robert holding me steady, I stepped forward and launched myself down the slide. The rush of air whipped against my face as I slid down, faster than I thought my old bones could handle. I hit the ground hard, rolling onto the grass. Pain shot through my hip, but I didn't care, I was alive. Above me, the plane smoked, flames licking at the wing. Passengers tumbled down the slide one after another, some crying, some silent with shock. Robert slid down right after me, landing beside me. He pulled me to my feet. "Come on, Maggie. We have to get farther away." We stumbled together across the grass, away from the burning plane. The ground was uneven, my body ached, but I didn't stop. Not until we were far enough to turn back and watch. The plane burned, black smoke curling into the sky. Sirens wailed in the distance, fire trucks racing toward us. Passengers huddled together, holding on to one another, some kneeling in the dirt to pray. I clutched Robert's arm, my whole body trembling. "We made it," I whispered, almost in disbelief. "We're alive." But even as the words left my lips, a loud crack split the air. One of the engines exploded, sending flames shooting higher into the sky. Screams rose again, and we all stumbled back. My heart pounded, my blood pressure soaring once more. Even on the ground, the danger wasn't over. The explosion shook the ground beneath us. The heat from the fire kissed my skin even though we had already run far from the wreckage. Passengers screamed, scattering like frightened birds across the open field. Some fell to their knees, covering their heads as if the sky itself was falling. I clutched Robert's sleeve, my legs wobbling beneath me. My chest felt tight, my heart pounding so hard I feared it would burst. "Lord," I whispered, "I can't take any more." But the nightmare wasn't finished. The fire spread quickly, eating across the wing. The smell of burning fuel filled the air, choking and bitter. The sirens grew louder, but the fire trucks seemed so far away. Oh, far away. Children cried as their parents pulled them close. An old man stumbled and fell to the ground, groaning. Two passengers rushed to his side, lifting him up and carrying him between them. Even in chaos, people were showing kindness, holding strangers, guiding the weak, helping one another. Emily, the brave flight attendant, had made it down the slide. Her uniform was streaked with soot, her hair wild, but her voice was steady. She ran up and down the gathering crowd, shouting instructions. "Stay together. Move farther back from the plane. Don't panic, help each other." Her courage was like a lantern in the dark. People listened, clinging to her orders as though they were ropes pulling us toward safety. Robert guided me farther away. His arm wrapped around my shoulders. "You're safe now," he said softly, though his own eyes were fixed nervously on the burning wreck. I shook my head. "Not yet. Not while it's still burning." He didn't argue. He just tightened his grip, steadying me as we moved back another 20 feet. We gathered in a ragged circle, survivors huddled together in shock. Some wept openly, others sat silent and wide-eyed. I lowered myself onto the grass, my knees too weak to hold me. My hands shook uncontrollably, and I pressed them against my chest. A woman sat beside me, cradling her little boy. Her eyes met mine, wide and wet. "We almost died," she whispered. I reached out, patting her hand gently. "But we didn't," I said softly. "We're still here. Hold on to that." Her lip trembled, but she nodded. Her son buried his face in her chest, whimpering. That was the low, the fragile calm of survivors clinging to each other while the wreck burned behind us. Then, without warning, another sound split the air, this one sharper, angrier. The flames roared louder, spreading to the tail of the plane. A gust of wind carried smoke straight toward us, thick and black. People coughed and covered their mouths, stumbling backward. "Move!" Emily shouted, waving her arms. "Get farther away. Now!" We scrambled to our feet, tripping and stumbling across the field. My lungs burned as I coughed into my sleeve, my vision blurring from the smoke. Robert pulled me along, his arm like iron around me. And then came the worst sound yet, a long, deep groan of metal twisting under pressure. The kind of sound that warns of collapse. I turned back just in time to see the roof of the plane buckle. The burning fuselage sagged, then split with a deafening crash. Fire shot skyward as pieces of the plane fell inward, collapsing into the inferno. Screams erupted around me. People cried out, some dropping to their knees, others running farther across the field. My own scream stuck in my throat as my heart slammed harder than ever before. I thought we were safe, but as the fire consumed what was left of the plane, a terrifying thought struck me. Had everyone made it out? Or were there still passengers trapped inside? The answer to that question might break me. The crash of the fuselage collapsing echoed through the field, followed by the roar of the fire consuming what was left. Black smoke twisted into the sky, thick enough to blot out the sun. I sat frozen, my heart pounding, my breath shallow. The question gnawed at me. Had everyone escaped? I scanned the survivors huddled together on the grass. Mothers clutching children. Fathers holding trembling hands. Young people staring blankly into the distance. Old men gasping for breath. But in the chaos it was impossible to count, impossible to know if anyone was missing. Emily's voice cut through the noise. "Stay together. The emergency teams are on their way." She moved from group to group, checking faces, calling out instructions. Her courage never wavered, even as the fire behind us roared louder. Robert sank down beside me, his chest heaving, his hair damp with sweat. He rubbed his forehead with a trembling hand. "Maggie," he said, his voice cracking, "we made it." I nodded, though my body was still shaking. "By the grace of God," I whispered. For a moment there was calm. That was the low. Survivors held each other, tears mixing with soot on their faces. Some prayed aloud, their words blending into a hum of gratitude and desperation. Others simply sat in silence, too shocked to speak. But the calm shattered when a scream rose from the crowd. A young woman, her face streaked with ash, pointed back at the burning wreck. "There are people still inside." My blood ran cold. Heads whipped around, eyes widening with horror. The woman's voice cracked as she shouted again. "I saw them. They didn't make it out." The realization hit us all at once. Not everyone had escaped. Emily froze for only a second before sprinting toward the fire. "Stay here," she shouted over her shoulder. "Don't follow me." Gasps erupted from the survivors. Some cried out, begging her not to go. But Emily didn't stop. She pulled her jacket over her mouth and charged up the emergency slide, disappearing into the black smoke. My hands flew to my chest. "Lord, protect her," I whispered. My heart hammered so hard I thought I'd collapse right there. Robert grabbed my arm, his eyes wide with disbelief. "She'll never make it," he muttered. But I knew, kindness was stronger than fear. Emily's courage came from love, and love can carry you farther than fear ever will. The minutes dragged like hours. We stared at the burning wreck, waiting, hoping, praying. The fire crackled louder, sparks shooting into the air. My eyes burned from the smoke, my throat raw. Still I didn't blink. In movement. Out of the smoke, Emily stumbled back down the slide, her arms wrapped around a small boy. His face was streaked with soot, his eyes wide and terrified. Behind her, another passenger appeared, coughing violently but alive. Cheers and sobs erupted from the survivors. Some clapped, others raised their hands to the sky in thanks. I felt hot tears run down my cheeks. My heart swelled with gratitude. Emily collapsed onto the grass, gasping for breath as others rushed to help her. The boy clung to her neck, crying into her shoulder. But even in that moment of triumph, another sound reached us, the distant whir of helicopters. We looked up to see rescue teams approaching at last. Relief washed through the crowd like cool water after fire. Yet, just as hope began to rise, another deafening boom shook the air. One of the remaining fuel tanks exploded, sending a fireball high into the sky. The ground shook beneath us and flames spread outward. The fire was moving toward us now. And once again terror surged. Were we safe or still in danger? The fireball lit up the sky like a second sun, and the shockwave sent us all stumbling backward. Children screamed, adults shouted, and the crowd broke into chaos. The fire wasn't just behind us anymore. It was spreading, crawling across the dry grass with hungry fingers. "Run!" someone shouted. Emily, though barely able to stand, lifted her arm and pointed toward the far end of the field. "That way! Away from the smoke!" We surged forward together, survivors helping each other. Some carried the weak on their backs, others guided the blind with hands wrapped tight. I held Robert's arm as he steadied me, our steps clumsy but determined. My legs trembled, but I knew stopping wasn't an option. The helicopters grew louder, circling overhead. Dust and smoke swirled as one of them began to descend, blades chopping the air. The sight filled me with relief. Help was finally here. But danger wasn't finished. As the helicopter lowered, the draft from its blades whipped the flames, pushing them in unpredictable bursts. Sparks rained down like fiery hail. One woman tripped, falling hard to the ground. Her little girl screamed, tugging at her arm. Without thinking, Robert rushed forward, hauling the woman to her feet and dragging her along. "Keep moving," he shouted, his voice strong despite his exhaustion. We stumbled farther into the field, lungs aching from the smoke. At last, emergency trucks reached the wreck, their hoses blasting powerful streams of water toward the fire. Men in heavy suits shouted to each other, their faces hidden behind masks. It was like watching warriors battle a monster. And for the first time I allowed myself to hope. The survivors were gathered in a clearing, far enough from the wreckage. Paramedics rushed among us, checking wounds, offering blankets and water. I collapsed onto the grass, my chest rising and falling in painful heaves. Robert sat beside me, gripping my hand so tightly it almost hurt. "You're safe now," he whispered. His eyes glistened with tears he didn't bother to hide. I looked around at the faces, ash-streaked, tear-stained, trembling, but alive. So many alive. And yet, my heart ached for those who hadn't made it, the ones swallowed by the fire. Emily sat nearby, the rescued boy still clinging to her. She looked exhausted, her face pale, but her eyes burned with quiet strength. When she caught me looking, I mouthed, "Thank you." She gave a small nod, as though it wasn't bravery at all. Just duty, just love. That was the low, the painful quiet after survival, the grief mixed with relief. But as night began to fall, the extreme moment that would stay with me forever arrived. Reporters appeared, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions at survivors. And in that moment, as bright lights blinded my weary eyes, I realized the whole world would know our story. Strangers across the country would see our faces, hear our cries and feel our fear. But what they might never know was the truth that burned itself into my heart that day. When life shakes you, when fire surrounds you, it's not fear that saves you. It's kindness. Strangers holding strangers, courage born from love, one hand pulling another out of the flames. At 75, I thought I'd seen all of life's storms. But this was different. My first flight had nearly ended my life. My heart had raced so hard I thought hypertension would strike me down right there on the grass. Yet here I sat, alive, holding Robert's hand, breathing the smoky air of a second chance. And as the helicopters lifted us away from the wreck, I whispered a prayer. Not just for myself, but for everyone who had walked through the fire and for those who hadn't. Life is fragile, my dears. But love, it's stronger than flames, stronger than fear, stronger than death. And that is the lesson I will never forget.